What would you do if the person you feared most at work knocked on your life's door at their weakest moment, and one small act of kindness ended up changing both your future forever? Stay with me, because this is not just a story about a single dad and his boss. It's about the night compassion rewrote destiny. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. Single dad took his drunk boss home, and her morning question changed everything. I never imagined that one late night at the office would change the course of my life. I was a single father, raising my 6-year-old daughter, Aina, with more love than money and more hope than certainty. Every day was a quiet battle between exhaustion and determination. I worked late not because I loved my job, but because I loved the little girl who waited for me at home with sleepy eyes and warm hugs. That night, the office lights were dim, and the cleaning staff had already left. I heard a soft thud in the hallway. When I stepped out, I found my boss, Ms. Karina, slumped against the wall, her heels discarded, her voice slurring apologies to no one in particular. She was always composed, always distant, always perfectly in control. But that night, she looked human, broken, even. I hesitated. Taking your drunk boss home was not in any employee handbook, but leaving another human being alone in that state felt like a betrayal of something deeper than rules. So I helped her into my old car, the one with a stubborn door that only opened from the outside. She murmured fragments of sentences on the way, about pressure, expectations, and the loneliness of being the strong one. I didn't ask questions. Sometimes, people don't need solutions. They just need a safe place to fall. When we reached my small apartment, I faced another hesitation. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, peeling paint, and a couch that had seen better decades. But it was home. I settled her on the couch with a blanket. My daughter stirred in the next room. "Papa," she whispered. "I'm here." "Sweetheart," I said softly. She patted out, so Miss Karina, and simply asked, "Is she sick?" "Yes," I replied. She had a hard day. Aina disappeared into her room and returned with her favorite stuffed rabbit. "She can hold Bun Bun," she said. "It helps when I feel bad." My throat tightened as I watched my little girl place her most treasured comfort beside a stranger. Kindness, I realized, is not taught with words. It is lived. Morning arrived with a smell of cheap coffee and sunlight sneaking through thin curtains. Ms. Karina woke slowly, confusion crossing her face as she took in the modest room, the blanket, and the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Then she saw me in the kitchen and Aina coloring at the table. She sat up, embarrassed. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice fragile without its usual authority. "It's okay," I replied. "Everyone needs help sometimes." She watched Aina for a moment before asking the question that changed everything. "How do you stay so kind when life has been this hard on you?" The room fell silent. No one had ever asked me that. People usually asked how I managed, how I afforded things, how I balanced work and parenting, but not why I chose kindness. I looked at my daughter, her crayons scattered like tiny rainbows across the table. "Because hardship taught me what it feels like to be alone," I said. "And I promised myself no one near me would ever feel that way if I could help it." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. That morning, she didn't rush to leave. She sat with us, sharing toast and quiet conversation. In the weeks that followed, something shifted at work. She wasn't just my boss anymore. She was someone who listened. She created flexible hours for parents. She started a small fund for employees facing emergencies. And one afternoon, she called me into her office, not with criticism, but with gratitude. "You reminded me who I wanted to be before success made me forget," she said. Months later, I was promoted, not because of pity, but because she had finally seen the dedication behind my tired eyes. But the real reward wasn't the raise. It was a change in the air at work. People smiled more. They helped each other more. Kindness, once planted, had begun to grow. That night, as I tucked Aina into bed, she asked, "Papa, did Bun Bun help your friend?" "Yes," I said, kissing her forehead. "Very much." She smiled, satisfied, and drifted to sleep. I sat beside her, realizing that in a world that often measures success in numbers, the greatest wealth we can offer is compassion. Moral, Kindness given in someone's weakest moment can transform not only their life, but your own, and its ripple can change the world around you. I thought that was the end of our story. I was wrong. Kindness, I learned, does not end with one good deed. It begins there. A few weeks after my promotion, I noticed Miss Karina staying late again. Not the cold, driven late nights I was used to, but quiet evenings where she reviewed files slowly, as if searching for something she had once lost. One evening, I knocked on her open door. "You should go home," I said gently. "The work will still be here tomorrow." She looked up and smiled. A real smile, not the polished one she wore in meetings. "I know," she said. "I'm just learning how to leave, without feeling like I'm failing." I understood that feeling too well. For years, I believed that if I stopped moving, everything would collapse. The bills, the responsibilities, my daughter's future. But survival is not the same as living. And living, I was beginning to see, requires rest, trust, and people who remind you that you're not alone. That weekend, she surprised us. There was a knock on my door Saturday morning. When I opened it, she stood there in simple clothes, holding a small box of pastries and looking slightly nervous. "I wasn't sure if this was appropriate," she said, "but I wanted to thank Aina properly." Aina ran to the door, her eyes lighting up. "You're Bonbon's friend," she exclaimed. Ms. Karina laughed, a sound so light it seemed to erase years from her face. We shared tea on mismatched cups, sitting on my worn sofa. She listened as Aina told dramatic stories about school, lost pencils, and playground heroes. And for the first time, my home didn't feel small. It felt full. Over the months, our lives intertwined in unexpected ways. She helped Aina get into a better school by sponsoring a scholarship program at the company. I helped her learn how to cook simple meals instead of living on takeout and deadlines. We weren't rescuing each other. We were rebuilding. One evening, as we walked through a park after a company family day she had organized, she confessed something softly. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," she said. "And now?" I asked. "Now I think strength is allowing yourself to be seen even when you're not perfect." Her words settled deep in my heart, because for years I had hidden my struggles behind polite smiles and "I'm fine." But the truth was, I had been tired, lonely, afraid, and yet, in choosing kindness instead of bitterness, I had unknowingly built a bridge, one that allowed others to cross toward me, too. A year later, our office looked nothing like it once had. There was a small play corner for employees' children. Flexible schedules were normal, not exceptions. Birthdays were celebrated. Hard times were shared, not hidden. People no longer worked like strangers occupying the same building. They worked like a community. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Aina slipped her hand into mine and asked, "Papa, did we fix her?" I knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart," I said, "we didn't fix her. We loved her, and she remembered how to love herself." Aina nodded as if that made perfect sense. Children understand truths adults spend years trying to learn. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the city. My life was still simple. The furniture was still worn. The future still uncertain. But my heart was no longer heavy, because I had seen what one moment of compassion could do. It could soften pride. It could heal loneliness. It could turn a workplace into a family. And it could teach a little girl that the world, despite its hardships, is full of people capable of extraordinary kindness. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed with a message from Ms. Karina. "Thank you for that night. It saved more than you know." I typed back, "We all need a place to fall sometimes." Then I set the phone aside, closed my eyes, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because life had become easy, but because it had become shared. And in sharing our burdens, we had multiplied our strength. Moral, continued. A single act of compassion can open hearts, restore dignity, and create a chain of kindness that transforms lives far beyond the moment it began. Peace, however, did not mean the end of challenges. Life is a way of testing the very lessons it teaches. A few months later, the company faced a financial downturn. Rumors spread like quiet storms through the hallways. Layoffs, budget cuts, uncertainty. I recognized a fear in my coworker's eyes. It was the same fear I had carried for years, the fear of losing stability, of failing those who depend on you. One afternoon, Ms. Karina called an all-staff meeting. Her voice was calm, but her honesty was unfiltered. "We are facing difficult months ahead," she said, "but we will face them together." There was no corporate jargon, no empty promises, only truth, and a commitment to protect as many jobs as possible by reducing executive bonuses, including her own. The room fell silent. Respect replaced fear. In that moment, I saw how far she had come from the lonely woman in the hallway that night. Leadership, I realized, is not authority, it is responsibility carried with compassion. That evening, I stayed late, reviewing reports and searching for ways to reduce costs without harming people. Not because I was asked to, but because this place had become more than a job. It was a community worth fighting for. When I finally returned home, exhaustion weighed on my shoulders. Aina noticed immediately. She placed her tiny hands on my cheeks and said, "Hard day?" I smiled. Yes, but not a hopeless one. She thought for a moment, then ran to her room and returned with a crumpled drawing. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "That's you, me, and Bum Bun's friend," she said proudly. "Why are we holding hands?" I asked. "So nobody falls," she replied simply. Her words stayed with me long after she fell asleep. The next day, I shared her drawing with Ms. Karina. She stared at it for a long time, her eyes glistening. "We won't let anyone fall," she said softly. And we didn't. The months that followed were not easy. We made sacrifices. We streamlined projects. We shared workloads. Some days were heavy with worry, but no one faced those days alone. Employees began bringing homemade lunches to share. Carpooling became common. Those who had more gave more. Those who had less gave what they could. Time, encouragement, presence. In the middle of hardship, kindness didn't shrink. It multiplied. Eventually, the company stabilized. Not because of one leader, not because of one employee, but because people chose unity over fear. On the day we received the news that layoffs were no longer necessary, the office erupted in quiet tears and relieved laughter. Ms. Karina found me near the window where sunlight streamed in, the same place where she had once asked me how I stayed kind. "You were right," she said. "No one near us felt alone." I shook my head. We were right. That evening, she joined us again at my apartment, not as a guest uncertain of a place, but as family. We celebrated with simple food, shared stories, and laughter that filled every corner of the small room. Aina climbed into her lap without hesitation. "See," she said, "nobody fell." We all laughed, but my eyes stung with quiet tears, because in a world that often measures success in profits and promotions, we had discovered something far more valuable: the strength of standing together, the courage to be gentle, the wisdom to care, and the truth that kindness is not a weakness in hard times. It is a light that guides us through them. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the laughter faded into comfortable silence, we sat by the window watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "What do you think would have happened if you had just walked past me?" I looked out at the lights, imagining a world where I had chosen indifference. "I think," I said slowly, "we both would have kept surviving, but we might never have truly lived." She nodded, understanding without needing more words. Because the greatest changes in life rarely come from grand gestures. They begin with small choices. A pause, a helping hand, a willingness to see the humanity in someone else's weakest moment. As the night deepened, Aina stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. I tucked the blanket around her and whispered a quiet promise to the future. No matter how hard life becomes, we will meet it with open hearts. And somewhere, someone will always be there to catch us when we stumble. Because kindness, once awakened, does not fade. It travels from one life to another, from one generation to the next. An endless story still being written. Final episode, Where Kindness Comes Home. Years passed more quickly than I ever thought possible. The tiny apartment with peeling paint was replaced by a modest but warm home filled with sunlight, books, and the quiet evidence of a life built with patience. Aina grew taller, her questions deeper, her kindness unchanged. She still kept Bun Bun on her bed, a little worn, a little faded, but loved beyond measure. And Ms. Karina, she never drifted out of our lives. She became Aunt Karina, the woman who showed up for school plays, brought burnt cookies she insisted were edible, and reminded us that perfection was never the goal, presence was. Our company did more than survive. It became known as a place where people were treated like human beings, not numbers. Other organizations began to ask about our policies, our culture, our secret. But there was no secret, just a simple truth. When people feel seen, they give their best not out of fear, but out of belonging. One evening, as we sat in the backyard watching the sky turn shades of amber and violet, Aina, now a thoughtful teenager, asked a question that brought everything full circle. "Papa," she said, "do you think one small choice can really change a whole life?" I looked at her, then at Miss Karina, who was watering the plants and pretending not to listen. I smiled. "I think one small choice can change many lives," I replied, "because kindness doesn't stop where it is given. It travels." She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that truth. In that quiet moment, I realized something profound. We had not built a perfect life. We had built a connected one, a life where pain was shared, joy was multiplied, and no one had to carry their burdens alone. Later that night, after everyone had gone inside, I remained under the open sky. I thought about the man I once was, tired, guarded, afraid of failing the one person who depended on me most. I thought about the woman who had once sat on my couch, holding a stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. And I thought about the little girl who believed that holding hands could keep people from falling. She had been right all along, not because holding hand prevents hardship, but because it ensures we never face hardship alone. Before toning in, I wrote a note and placed it on Aina's desk for her to find in the morning. Never underestimate the power of your gentle heart. In a world rushing past pain, be the one who pauses. In moments of weakness, be the one who stays. Kindness may seem small, but it is a seed from which stronger worlds grow. When I finally turned off the lights, I felt the same quiet peace that had found me years ago, not the peace of an easy life, but the peace of a meaningful one. A life shaped by compassion, a life strengthened by community, a life where a single act of kindness had rippled outward, touching more hearts than I could ever count. Final moral. True success is not measured by wealth, titles, or power, but by the lives we uplift along the way. A single act of kindness, offered without expectation, can heal wounds, restore hope, and create a chain of compassion that makes the world gentler for everyone. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, leave a comment below, and remind someone, you are never alone.